The twin sons of planet Rylith painted the land in gold and crimson. In a small alien village made of crystal huts and glowing vines, there lived a girl named Lyra. She was born different. Her legs never moved, not even once. While others danced in the light of the suns, she could only watch from the shadows. Her people called her the Still One. They said the spirits had cursed her. She never laughed when others played. She never joined the hunts. She only sat near the glowing river, tracing its ripples with her hands, dreaming of running even once. Her mother died when she was young. Her father, unable to face the shame, left her outside the elder's hut and never came back. From that day, Lyra lived alone in a small shelter built from discarded wood and scrap metal. She survived by trading small crystal carvings she made with her hands. Each night she carved shapes of people running, something she'd never done yet always imagined. But deep inside, she never stopped hoping. She watched the stars every night, whispering to them, "Please take me away from here, even if it's just once." The stars never answered. Until one night, they did. A roaring light streaked across the dark sky like a burning comet. The ground trembled, birds screamed, and the air turned electric. The villagers ran in fear, shouting about the wrath of the gods. But Lyra did not run. She couldn't. She only watched as the fireball tore through the clouds and vanished behind the ridge beyond the crystal fields. For the first time in years, she felt something powerful inside her, curiosity stronger than fear. She dragged herself across the dirt, using her arms to pull her body toward the glow in the distance. The ground cut her hands, her arms shook, but she didn't stop. Her heart pounded with every pull. The village lights faded behind her as she entered the open desert. Wind whipped through her hair. Every movement hurt, but she kept going. Hours passed. The glow grew brighter. Smoke rose in the distance. She could smell burning metal. And then she saw it. A giant silver shape half buried in the sand, steam rising from its broken hull. It was not of her world. Strange letters shimmered faintly on its side, USS Horizon. Her heart skipped. "A starship," she whispered, voice trembling. Through the shattered window she saw something move, a human man. He was bleeding, struggling to stand. He lifted a small device to his mouth and spoke, but no one answered. Then another movement, a small child crying inside the wreck. Lyra's eyes widened. A father. And his child. Her tribe always told stories about humans. Strange creatures from a dying planet who wandered the stars, desperate and dangerous. But this man didn't look dangerous. He looked broken. Like her. For a long moment she froze. She had never spoken to an outsider. If her tribe found out, they'd call her cursed again or worse. But the child's cries pierced the night. Something deep inside her refused to stay silent. Using a fallen piece of metal as support, she dragged herself closer. Sparks danced around her. The heat burned her palms, but she pushed on. When she reached the ship's edge, she called softly, "Can you hear me?" The man turned. His eyes were tired, his arm bleeding badly. He tried to speak but only coughed. "Help, my daughter," he said weakly, pointing toward the wreck's back section. Lyra hesitated. She wasn't strong. She couldn't even walk. But when she looked at that little girl, hair tangled, face covered in soot, she saw her own reflection, the child she used to be, the one no one came for. She clenched her fists. "Hold on," she whispered. She used her arms to climb the side of the wreck, slipping on the smooth metal again and again. Her body screamed in pain, but her heart was louder. Inside, smoke filled her lungs, but she crawled through the wreckage, pulling the crying girl out by her tiny arms. The child gasped as fresh air hit her face. The man collapsed beside them, whispering something she couldn't understand. Lyra didn't know what to do. The human man was pale, his breathing shallow. She looked at the sky. Her tribe would never help them. They'd kill the outsiders. So she tore a piece of her shawl and wrapped it around his wound. She dragged both father and daughter toward the rocks, away from the smoking wreck, until she couldn't move anymore. For the first time in her life, she had saved someone. The suns were rising again when the little girl woke. She looked at Lyra and smiled weakly. "Thank you," she whispered in her soft human voice. Lyra froze. No one had ever said those words to her before. She didn't even know how to reply. Her lips trembled. "You're welcome," she said slowly, her voice shaking like morning wind. The father stirred, eyes opening to see his daughter safe. When he looked at Lyra, the alien girl covered in dust and ash, legs motionless, his gaze softened. "You saved us," he said. Lyra nodded slightly. "I couldn't walk away," she replied, half smiling at her own joke. The man let out a weak laugh, a sound filled with warmth and gratitude. For Lyra, it was the first time someone had looked at her not with pity, not with fear, but with respect. As the suns climbed higher, the wreck smoked in the distance. The desert was silent except for the soft wind between them. Lyra didn't know who this man was or what fate had brought him here. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. When morning light touched the desert, the smoke from the wreck was still rising. Lyra sat beside the human and his little girl. The man's skin was pale, his breathing slow. She didn't even know his name, but she had wrapped his arm with her own shawl, trying to stop the bleeding. The child was awake now, sitting quietly, hugging her knees. Her big brown eyes watched Lyra with both fear and wonder. She had never seen an alien before. Lyra smiled softly, trying to look kind, and offered her some water from a small flask. The girl hesitated, then took it. "Emmy," the child whispered, touching her chest, showing her name. Lyra blinked. "Lyra," she said, pointing to herself. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two beings from different worlds, both alone. The man stirred, groaning. His voice was deep but weak. "Emmy?" The little girl ran to him. "Daddy, you're okay," she cried. Lyra stayed back, unsure. She didn't understand their words, but she understood their feelings. She saw love in the way the man touched his daughter's hair. It felt strange, like a memory she never had. When he finally noticed her, he tensed. His human eyes scanned her. Her glowing blue skin, the metallic brace around her useless legs. But instead of fear, his face showed confusion. "And then gratitude, you saved us," he said slowly. His voice was rough but gentle. Lyra didn't understand all the words, but she caught the tone. She nodded. "You, safe now?" The man looked around the endless desert. "Where are we?" Lyra hesitated, then pointed toward the far cliffs. "Village. There." He tried to stand, but pain forced him down again. His wound was worse than she thought. He needed real care, something she didn't have. For hours, she stayed by his side, keeping Emmy calm, feeding them pieces of dried root she carried in her pouch. When the suns began to set, she made a small fire using broken ship metal and glowing crystals. The light flickered on their faces, and one alien, one human, and a child caught between two worlds. That night, as Emmy slept beside her father, Lyra stared at the stars again. She had prayed to them for change, and they had answered in the strangest way possible. The next morning, the man was stronger. He managed to sit up, checking the wreck from afar. "Beacon's broken," he muttered. "No signal. We're stranded." Lyra crawled closer, watching him work. He pulled small tools from his belt and opened a small device. Sparks flew. She flinched, but curiosity pulled her closer. She handed him a crystal shard. It hummed with soft energy. He raised his brow. "Power source?" She nodded. "Energy. Good." Together, they began to fix the beacon. He showed her where to place the crystals. She copied his actions. Slowly, they began to understand each other through gestures and smiles. Hours passed, and something unusual happened. He began to laugh when she made small mistakes. She smiled when he fixed them. Even Emmy giggled when the beacon suddenly exploded in a puff of smoke, covering them all in gray dust. For the first time in years, Lyra laughed. A real laugh. It startled even her. Then danger came. A low growl echoed across the desert. From behind the rocks, 3 shadowy creatures crawled out. Desert predators with long claws and glowing red eyes. Emmy screamed and ran behind her father. Mason, that was his name. She finally learned it when Emmy shouted, "Daddy Mason!" Grabbed a broken metal rod, ready to fight despite his wounds. The creatures circled them. Mason swung once, but one claw struck his side, cutting deep. He fell to his knees. Emmy cried. Lyra's heart pounded. She didn't think. She moved. Using her arms, she threw herself between them, swinging a burning crystal from the fire. It hissed, sending sparks into the air. One beast leaped at her. She jammed the crystal into its mouth. It screamed and fell back. Mason, half conscious, reached for another rod and struck the second creature. The third fled into the sand. Silence fell again, except for the wind and Emmy's sobs. Lyra dragged herself toward Mason. His face was pale again, but his eyes were open. He looked at her, blood on his lips, and whispered, "You saved us. Again." Lyra pressed her hands over his wound, tears mixing with dust. "No more hurt," she whispered. Emmy held her small hand on top of Lyra's. Together, they stayed like that, human and alien, father and daughter, the outcast girl who could not walk, all bound by one thing, the will to survive. As the suns fell below the horizon, Lyra looked toward her village in the far distance. The fire's smoke rose high. She knew her people would see it, and she knew they would come. The next morning, silence covered the desert like a soft blanket. The wrecked ship lay still, half buried in sand. Smoke had faded, leaving only the smell of metal and dust. Lyra sat beside Mason, the human father, who slept under a shade she had built from ship panels. His little girl, Emmy, was curled up beside him, holding his arm like it was her whole world. Lyra watched them quietly. The sight touched something deep inside her, a feeling she didn't know she could still feel. She had lived alone all her life. No one had ever held her hand the way Emmy held her father's. Mason's wounds were bad. The cut on his side had turned red and swollen. Lyra knew herbs that could help, but they only grew near her village, and her tribe hated outsiders. Still, she made her decision. Before sunrise, she dragged herself across the sand, heading toward the glowing cliffs. Her arms burned, but she didn't stop. The desert wind bit her skin, yet she pushed forward until she found what she needed, the blue healing roots that grew in cracks of stone. She tore them out with shaking hands and hurried back. When she returned, Mason was awake. He tried to sit up, but pain made him grunt. "Easy," Lyra said softly, grinding the roots into paste. She spread the blue paste on his wound. It shimmered faintly as it touched his skin. Mason's eyes widened. "It's warm," he said. She smiled. "It heals." For the next few days, she stayed with them. Mason fixed small things from the wreck, while Lyra gathered food and glowing stones to keep the camp bright at night. Emmy followed her everywhere, asking questions in her little human voice. Most words Lyra didn't understand, but Emmy's laughter needed no translation. Sometimes, Mason watched them both, the human father and the alien girl who couldn't walk, and wondered how fate could be so strange. One evening, as the sun set in deep orange light, Mason spoke quietly while sharpening a piece of metal. "I was a soldier once," he said. "I fought for a home that doesn't exist anymore." Lyra listened, her glowing eyes reflecting the firelight. "My wife, she died when Emmy was born," he continued. "We were escaping from the war on Earth. I promised her I'd find a safe world." He looked at his daughter sleeping beside the fire. "I guess I crashed on one instead." Lyra's heart ached. She understood loss. She knew what it meant to live with emptiness. "You found me?" she said softly. He looked up surprised, then smiled. "Yeah, I guess I did." Later that night, while Mason repaired his beacon, he noticed Lyra watching with fascination. She pointed at the tools and tilted her head. "You make?" "Fix," he corrected gently. "To fix is to make better." She repeated the word carefully. Fix, an idea lit in his mind. He studied her old metallic brace, a crude device her tribe had given her long ago to drag her body. It was broken and rusted. He glanced at the spare hover parts from his ship. "Maybe I can fix something for you too," he said. Lyra frowned. "For me?" "Yeah," he said with a grin. "Let's give those arms a break." The next day he worked non-stop, building something from the remains of the hover sled, a small floating chair powered by crystal energy. Lyra watched silently, unsure if she should hope. When he finally finished, he helped her climb onto it. The chair lifted gently from the ground. For the first time in her life, Lyra was not crawling. She floated, weightless, free, her eyes filled with tears. She looked at Mason, voice trembling. "I walk?" He smiled. "Better?" "You fly," she laughed, a sound bright and pure. Emmy clapped her hands and shouted, "See, Daddy? She can move." Lyra turned her chair toward the glowing river. The breeze brushed her face, carrying the scent of freedom. For once, she didn't feel cursed. She felt alive, but their moment of peace didn't last long. From the ridge beyond the dunes, a horn sounded, deep and sharp. Lyra froze. Her tribe? They had seen the smoke and come searching. She turned to Mason, her face pale. "They come," she whispered. "Who?" he asked. "My people," she said quietly. "They hate humans." The wind carried the echo of many footsteps. The sound of drums followed, the sound of judgment. Mason reached for his weapon. "Then we stand together," he said. Lyra stared at him, her heart torn between fear and hope. The first people to ever care for her were now in danger because of her. As the shadows of her tribe appeared on the horizon, her hover chair hummed softly beneath her, a symbol of her new life, about to collide with her old one. The air turned heavy as the sun dipped behind the cliffs. A deep horn echoed again across the sand, followed by the shimmer of armor and movement on the ridge. Lyra's heart sank. Her tribe had come. The desert wind carried their voices, sharp, angry, familiar. They were calling her name. "Lyra, come out!" She could see them now, warriors wrapped in glowing cloth, spears tipped with blue fire. Their leader, Elder Torin, rode a beast with crystal scales. His golden eyes burned with judgment. Mason stood beside the campfire, a metal rod in his hand, his body still weak but ready. Emmy clung to him, frightened. Lyra floated beside them in her hover chair, her hands shaking. "They will hurt you," she whispered. "My people, they hate outsiders." Mason looked at her calmly. "I'm not leaving you." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. The warriors surrounded the camp in a half circle. Torin dismounted and stepped forward. "Lyra," he said, his voice deep as thunder. "You shame our tribe. You touch the cursed ones from the stars. You bring danger to our land." Lyra lowered her head. "They needed help. I saved them. You brought death," Torin shouted, pointing his spear at Mason. "Look at them. Warborn humans. Destroyers of worlds. They burn everything they touch." Mason didn't understand all the words, but he could read their tone. Hatred, disgust. He moved slightly in front of Emmy. Lyra's chair hummed, moving closer to him. "He is not your enemy," she said firmly. "He is kind. He made me walk again." Murmurs rippled through the tribe. The outcast girl defending a human? It was unthinkable. Torin's eyes narrowed. "He tricked you. He uses you." Lyra's voice trembled but didn't break. "No. He fixed me when you left me to die." For a moment, even the wind stopped. The truth cut deep. The elder's face darkened. "You were weak." "The tribe cannot carry weakness." Lyra raised her chin. "Weak? I crawled across the desert to save a child. What have you done but hide behind your pride?" A hush fell over the warriors. No one had ever spoken to the elder like that. Torin lifted his spear, furious. "Enough, you will return to the tribe now. The outsiders will be left to the sands." Mason stepped forward, his voice steady, though he knew they might not understand. "She stays with us. She's family now." Torin's head snapped toward him. The word family meant something sacred even among aliens. He snarled, "A human dares claim one of us?" He motioned for his warriors. "Take the girl. Kill the man," Emmy screamed. Mason raised the rod, but he was still weak. The warriors advanced until Lyra's hover chair shot forward, glowing bright with crystal light. "Stop!" she cried, voice echoing through the desert. The chair's energy flared, sending a shockwave of light that made the sand ripple. Everyone froze in awe. She hovered in front of Mason, her face lit with courage. "You will not touch them. If you kill him, you kill me too." The elder hesitated. He saw something new in her, and not weakness, but strength. The cursed girl now flying on light, standing between two worlds. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why protect him?" "Because he saw me as a person," she said. "Not a curse." The tribe stood silent. Even the beasts lowered their heads. Torin's grip on the spear loosened. "If you leave with them, you are no longer one of us." Lyra took a slow breath, pain in her heart. She looked at her village far beyond the dunes, her home, her childhood, her loneliness. Then she looked at Mason and Emmy, the small human family who gave her more than her people ever did. "I was never truly one of you," she whispered. Torin turned away. "Then go. But when the desert turns against you, do not call our name." He raised his hand, and the warriors began to leave, their glowing spears fading into the night. Lyra watched them disappear until the darkness swallowed their lights. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but a small smile grew on her lips. Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Yes, I am free." But even as peace settled over them, a low rumble began in the distance, thunder rolling across the horizon. A storm was coming. Mason looked toward the dark clouds spreading fast. "That doesn't look friendly," he murmured. Lyra stared at the glowing sky, her heart uneasy. "No," she said quietly. "That storm, is not normal. The horizon glowed with strange light, blue, green, and violet streaks twisting like living fire. The desert wind grew stronger, howling through the broken ship. The air smelled like iron and rain. Lyra floated above the sand in her hover chair, watching the sky crack with lightning. Mason stood beside her, one arm still wrapped in bandages, his eyes fixed on the approaching storm. Emmy held tightly to his leg, frightened by the thunder that shook the ground. "That's not a normal storm," Mason said quietly. "It's moving too fast," Lyra nodded, her voice trembling. "It's an energy storm. The crystals in the ground, they feed it. It burns everything." The wind roared louder. Dust and glowing shards began to swirl around them. Mason looked at the sky, then at his daughter. "We have to find shelter, now." They began to move toward the rocky cliffs. Lyra led the way, her hover chair struggling against the growing wind. The sands turned into a storm of light and the suns vanished behind black clouds. Halfway to the cliffs, a terrible sound echoed behind them. Cries of fear. Lyra turned and froze. Her tribe was there. Dozens of warriors ran through the storm, their banners whipping in the wind. They had not gone far. The storm had caught them too. Lightning struck the ground near them, throwing sand and fire into the air. Lyra's heart clenched. She could leave them. They had rejected her, hated her, but she couldn't. "They'll die out there," she whispered. Mason followed her gaze. "Then we help them," he said simply. She looked at him in disbelief. "They wanted to kill you." He gave a small smile. "Then maybe they'll have to change their minds." Without waiting, Mason lifted Emmy into his arms and ran toward the tribe. The wind nearly pushed him down, but he kept moving. Lyra followed, her chair humming with blue light as she cut through the storm. When they reached the tribe, chaos ruled. Beasts screamed, warriors fell, and crystal shards flew like knives. Elder Torin struggled to lift a fallen banner, shouting for his people to take cover. Lyra hovered beside him. "Follow me," she yelled over the wind. "There's shelter in the cliffs." The elder turned, eyes wide with disbelief. "You came back?" "Yes," she shouted. "Now move before the storm eats us all." He hesitated, pride still in his heart. But another bolt of lightning struck nearby, melting the sand into glass. That was enough. "Go!" he commanded, waving his hand. The tribe began to follow Lyra and Mason through the storm. Lyra's hover chair flickered as energy surged through the air. Sparks danced across her skin, but she didn't stop. Emmy clung to Mason's neck, crying as sand whipped her face. Finally, they reached the cliffs. Mason found a deep cave in the rock and guided everyone inside. The storm raged outside like a living beast roaring against the walls. Lightning flashed again and again, turning the sky white. Inside, silence fell, only the sound of heavy breathing and the distant thunder. The tribe huddled together, watching the human and the outcast girl they once despised. Elder Torin walked slowly to Lyra. His face was no longer angry. "You could have left us," he said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Lyra looked down at her trembling hands. "Because you are my people, even if you never wanted me." The old warrior lowered his head. "Perhaps we were wrong." He turned to Mason. "You fought for us even when we wished you dead." "You have my respect," Mason nodded, exhausted. "We don't have to fight each other. We just have to survive together." Hours passed. The storm raged without mercy. The light from outside flashed through the cave like fire. Then, without warning, the ground shook violently. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling. The tribe screamed, "Get down!" Mason shouted, pulling Emmy close. A boulder fell toward Lyra, but before it hit, Torin pushed her out of the way. The rock crashed beside him, trapping his leg. He groaned in pain. Lyra gasped. "Elder!" Mason rushed over, helping to lift the stone. Together, they freed the old leader, his armor cracked and bleeding. He looked at them both, voice weak. "The storm will pass soon. When it does, you must lead them, Lyra." Her eyes widened. "Me?" He nodded slowly. "You have more courage than any of us. You gave us hope." Outside, the storm finally began to fade. The thunder grew distant and the desert calmed. The suns broke through the clouds again, painting the land gold once more. Everyone stepped out of the cave, eyes wide at the sight. The desert was glowing with new life. The storm's energy had changed the land, making it shimmer like glass. Lyra looked at Mason and Emmy, then at her tribe. She had saved them all. For the first time, they bowed their heads to her. Mason smiled softly. Seems they finally see you the way I do. Lyra's eyes filled with quiet tears. Maybe the storm had a reason. When the storm finally faded, the desert was silent again. The sand glowed faintly under the twin suns, turned into glassy hills by the lightning. The tribe stepped out of the cave slowly, blinking against the bright light. They had survived the night. Barely. But not everyone stood among them. Lyra looked around, her hover chair humming softly. "Where is Mason?" she asked. Emmy's small voice broke the silence. "Daddy?" Her eyes searched the crowd, then the desert beyond. Mason was gone. Only his broken weapon lay near the cave entrance, half buried in crystal dust. Lyra's chest tightened. She felt her heart drop like a stone. She turned to Elder Torin, who leaned weakly on his staff. "Did anyone see him?" One of the warriors shook his head. "He was helping the others when the rocks fell. After that, we didn't see him again." Lyra's hands trembled. She remembered the crash of stones, the shaking earth, and Mason pushing someone out of the way. He must have been trapped. Emmy began to cry. "We have to find him, please." Lyra reached for her gently. "We will," she said softly, though fear was already clawing at her heart. "I promise." The elder looked at her. "The caves are dangerous now," he warned. "They may collapse again." "I don't care," she said firmly. "He saved you. Now I'll save him." The tribe watched as Lyra turned her hover chair toward the wrecked valley. Emmy refused to stay behind. She climbed onto Lyra's lap, small hands gripping tightly. Together they went back into the ruins. The storm had left the land in ruin. Broken rocks glowed faintly, and the air was filled with a strange humming sound. The energy of the storm still alive beneath the ground. Lyra's hover chair floated slowly over fallen stones. Every few meters she called out, "Mason! Can you hear me?" Her voice echoed through the silent canyon, but no answer came. Emmy's voice was small. "He's not gone, right?" Lyra smiled weakly. "Your father is too strong to give up." But inside, doubt grew heavier. Hours passed. The suns climbed higher, burning the glassy sand. Lyra's arms ached from steering through the narrow paths. She refused to stop. She couldn't stop. Finally, she heard something. A faint metallic sound like someone hitting a rock. She froze, listening. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Emmy nodded quickly. "It's Daddy." They followed the sound through a broken tunnel, half filled with crystal shards. The walls shimmered with blue light, reflecting their faces. And then they saw it, a collapsed chamber with a piece of metal moving weakly under the rubble. Lyra gasped. "Mason!" She rushed forward, lowering her hover chair to the ground. Mason lay half buried under fallen crystal roots, his face pale, breathing shallow. His arm was pinned beneath a heavy stone. "Lyra," he whispered faintly, his lips dry. "You made it." Tears blurred her vision. "Don't talk," she said softly. "We're getting you out." She pushed with all her strength, but the rock wouldn't move. She screamed in frustration, slamming her palms against it. "No, not now," Emmy cried, kneeling beside her father. "Daddy, please wake up." Lyra looked at the glowing crystals around them. Their light pulsed slowly, alive with storm energy. An idea sparked in her mind. She took one of the crystals and pressed it against her hover chair's engine. "If it can lift me," she murmured, "it can lift this." She rewired the power cables with trembling hands, connecting them to the chair's thrusters. The hum grew louder. The chair shook violently. "Hold on," she told Emmy. With a flash of light, the hover chair released a burst of energy. The thrusters fired downward, and the rock lifted inch by inch. The heat burned Lyra's arms, but she kept pushing until Mason was free. The rock crashed aside, and Lyra fell back, gasping. The chair sparked and went silent, broken beyond repair. But she didn't care. She crawled to Mason's side and pressed her ear to his chest. A heartbeat, faint but real. "He's alive," she whispered, smiling through tears. Emmy sobbed in relief, hugging her father's arm. Lyra tore pieces from her clothes to bandage his wounds, whispering softly, "You always save others, Mason. Now it's my turn." Together, with Emmy's help, she used the hover chair's frame as a stretcher. Inch by inch, she dragged him out of the ruins, her body trembling but her spirit burning bright. When they finally reached the sunlight, the tribe was waiting. They gasped at the sight. Lyra crawling through the sand, carrying the human who once crashed from the stars. Elder Torin stepped forward, awe in his eyes. "You brought him back." Lyra looked up, sweat and dust covering her face. "No one deserves to die alone," she said simply. The elder nodded slowly. "You have proven yourself, Lyra of Two Worlds." As the suns began to set, painting the sky gold and purple, Mason stirred weakly. His eyes opened, finding hers. "You found me," he whispered. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Always, he reached for her hand. "You saved my life again," she laughed softly. "We keep saving each other." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Then I guess we're even." But Lyra shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "I still owe you something. A promise I haven't made yet." Mason looked at her, confused, but she only smiled. The kind of smile that carried both pain and hope. The twin suns rose slowly over the glassy desert, spreading golden light across the land that had survived the storm. The air was calm again, gentle, quiet, peaceful. For the first time in many years, Lyra felt that the world itself was breathing again. Mason lay resting near the campfire, his wounds cleaned and bandaged. Emmy sat beside him, tracing small circles on his hand, whispering stories in her tiny voice. Her laughter was soft, the kind that made even silence feel alive. Lyra watched them from a short distance. Her hover chair was broken, lying beside her like a fallen friend. She didn't mind. Her arms were sore, her body weak, but her heart felt stronger than ever. The tribe had set up camp nearby. After all that had happened, they no longer called her cursed. They called her savior. The outcast girl who couldn't walk had led them through the storm, saved their lives, and brought back the man they once called an enemy. Elder Toran approached her quietly. His once proud armor was cracked, his movements slow, but his eyes were warm now. "You should rest," he said. Lyra smiled faintly. "I can rest later." He looked toward Mason and Emmy. "You care for them deeply." She nodded. "They showed me kindness when no one else did." The elder's gaze softened. "There was a time I thought strength meant walking without falling. You have shown me I was wrong. Real strength is rising even when you cannot walk at all." Lyra lowered her eyes. "I never wanted to lead anyone." "Yet you did," he said. "Perhaps that is why you deserve it." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "When I am gone, the tribe will need a new voice, and one that can speak for both worlds." She looked up, surprised. "Me?" He nodded. "You, Lyra of Two Sons?" For a moment she couldn't speak. The same tribe that had abandoned her was now asking her to lead them. The same world that once called her broken now called her strong. But her heart already knew where it belonged. She turned her chair toward Mason and rolled closer. The human stirred at the sound, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her, he smiled weakly. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she laughed softly. "You almost became one." He tried to sit up, but she pressed her hand gently against his shoulder. "Stay still. You need to heal." "I'll be fine," he said, his voice rough but warm. "I've got a tough nurse." Emmy giggled and threw her arms around Lyra. "You saved Daddy." "You're our hero." Lyra hugged her back tightly. The little girl's warmth filled the emptiness that had lived inside her for so long. When Emmy ran off to fetch water, Mason looked at Lyra, his expression thoughtful. "You could stay with your people now. They need you." She was quiet for a long time. "They do," she admitted. "But I think I've already found my people." Mason blinked. "What do you mean?" Lyra smiled gently. "A tribe isn't just blood or species. It's who you fight for, who you would crawl through fire to save." He stared at her, the desert light reflecting in his tired eyes. "You saved us more than once. I don't even know how to thank you." She looked down, then back at him with quiet courage. "You already did. You gave me freedom and a family." Mason's chest tightened. "Lyra!" She reached out and took his hand. Her skin glowed faintly where they touched, the sign of her people's bond. "You once said you lost your home," she whispered. "Maybe we both lost something, but now, maybe we can build a new one." Mason's hand closed gently around hers. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Her voice trembled, but her smile never faded. "Yes," she said. "If you'll have me." For a long moment he didn't speak. Then with a quiet laugh that carried more relief than words could, he nodded. Then it settled. When Emmy came running back, she stopped in front of them, holding her bucket of water. "What's happening?" Mason looked at her, then at Lyra. "We're going to be a family now." The little girl gasped, then squealed with joy, hugging them both. Lyra laughed through tears, her heart overflowing. The tribe watched from afar, silent and moved. Elder Torin smiled faintly and whispered to the wind. Perhaps the stars chose well. As night fell, the twin moons rose above the desert, one silver, one blue. The three of them sat together near the fire, their shadows long against the glowing sand. Lyra rested her head against Mason's shoulder. "You gave me more than legs," she said softly. "You gave me a life." He looked at her with quiet love. "And you gave us hope." The fire crackled gently as the wind carried their laughter across the endless desert. A human, an alien and a child bound not by blood, but by heart. Under the stars, Lyra finally whispered the words she had once said to the sky as a lonely girl. "Thank you for sending me someone who made me feel alive."